Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazo.
Brothers and sisters in Christ, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you so very much. Another great podcast today. We're talking about media, globalism, anti-Semitism, everything that I think we need to keep up to speed on to some degree. Can't keep up with everything, but we have others who do keep up with that. One of those individuals I have on the podcast is Breanna 𝐃𝐨𝐬. She's the founder, president, and editor-in-chief of Harbinger's Daily News. Go to harbingersdaily.com. And also a branch of that, if you want to watch videos, Harbingers TV. That's harbingers.tv. A lot of great content, tons. So you can get all your information there and everything that the liberal media and the main outlets and the majority of media in America and around the world do not report on. Sadly, this is from a biblical lens, and that's why I appreciate Harbingers and Breanna so very much. I want to bring her in right now. Welcome back to the podcast, sister. Good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So I'm excited because before we get into some of the stuff we need to talk about, I want to share some great news, and that is you're coming back to Green Bay for next year's Worldview Matters Conference. And there's the graphic right there. It's going to be at the Tundra Lodge Resort Conference Center, and they got a water park there. That's just down the street from Lambeau Field in Green Bay. We are having 14 speakers. Breanna is one of 14. So we're taking it up a notch next year. And the reason I'm mentioning it now, not only because Breanna is on the podcast, but also because we've got our speakers all confirmed, and Lord willing, in just a few days, August 15, you will be able to register and get tickets. And I want to remind you, this year's conference sold out early. So we're putting this up early, and we're not waiting until 4 or 5 months before. We're putting this up August 15, a couple days from now. You can click on worldviewmattersconference.com and you click on the links. They should hopefully take you to Eventbrite, where you can reserve your seats. Get them early, get it out of the way. That way you don't have to worry about it months down the road, or you might forget. So I'm just going to run down the speakers again really briefly. Breanna's going to be there. I'll be hosting. Nathan Jones, Alex Newman, Hadia Miramati-Falco, Mark Henry, Andy Woods, Mark and Amber Archer are coming back, Pete Garcia, Steve Smotherman, Matthew Mayer, Brandon Holthouse, J.B. Hickson, and Brian Thomas. Did I already mention Alex Newman? I think I did, but Alex is coming back as well. So I'm out of breath just thinking about it, but it's going to be awesome. 2 packed days with Friday night, just one night Q&A with the panel of all the speakers. We'll do a roundtable with as many speakers that can be there on Friday night. So again, friends, worldviewmattersconference.com. You will be hearing a lot about that in the days, weeks, and months to come. Breanna, let's get right into what you do at Harbingers Daily, because it's so important. And I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think you have a lot of competition doing exactly what you're doing. I'm not aware of that. I know there's some great conservative ministries and maybe news sites, but not anyone who does exactly what you guys are doing. Am I off on that?
Well, no, there's some really good Christian news organizations that we partner with, but the vast majority of a lot of these Christian news groups, or that have the label of Christian news groups, are very compromised in what they're doing, and you may find some voices on there that are great, and then you just have so much compromise whittled through the rest of it, so that the media that you're getting is really not as trusted as it ought to be, and certainly not through a biblical lens. So there is Decision Magazine and Washington Stand, which also do a great job job. Washington Stand is a news division of the Family Research Council, and Decision Magazine is from the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, and we work with both of them. And so there are a few, but Harbinger's Daily certainly works with the boldest voices of our day, and the writers across the world, and with an audience across the world as well, to cover the news extensively within these areas, and especially the United States and Israel.
So you guys run on donations, and is that correct? So people can donate to what you're doing. I don't think I've mentioned that a lot on this podcast, but can you share a little bit more about that? How do you guys operate? How do you run?
Well, Harbinger's Daily is entirely funded by donation. We don't have any kind of paywall. We didn't want to put any kind of biblical truth behind a wall where people would have to pay to be able to see it. And we also took a stand right at the beginning where we didn't want any paid advertising. We wanted to, or certainly not from Google Sense and AdSense and all of these things. But the advertising on our site is all from our trusted ministries, and it's all donated by Harbinger's Daily to those trusted ministries, because those resources are extremely, valuable to Christians to have. We should have, every inch of Harbinger's Daily be something that is, edifying and equipping to the reader. And so that's the direction that God led us to go. But that does mean that we rely entirely on, the donations of our readers.
I want to thank you for that, because it's disappointing when you see some great content or a great article of importance that you have to pay to get past or subscribe. And
especially with a Christian news organization, you don't want to say, "Hey, do you want to hear what the Bible has to say about this?" And then put it behind a paywall, especially when this truth is so needed right now within our society about what the Bible says about these things.
Amen, sister. Again, thank you. So let's dive into the first article real quick. We're going to talk about Canada. Why? Because what happens in the UK or what happens in Canada doesn't stay in Canada. And I want to quote your first opening statement. Many Western nations are careening down a path of radical progressivism, but no nation may be further down the track than America's neighbor to the north. And then you get into conversion therapy, and just walk us through some of these areas of, just radicalism, progressive ideology for us.
Well, and what I talk about in the article as well is that the primary reason that Canada is so radical is because there's not adequate opposition. And when you don't have anybody that's willing to slow down the train, then it's just going to keep careening down that path. And but we see that a lot. There's very good examples of that in Canada. In 2021, there was a conversion therapy ban passed. And if you don't know what a conversion therapy ban is, it's essentially criminalizing anything that would draw an individual away from the LGBT lifestyle. And so under these laws, sharing biblical truth from the pulpit, if you're a pastor, if you're a parent sharing it with your child, if you're praying with somebody that's in, the homosexual lifestyle, and they want to, be out of that and be aligned with what the Bible has to say, that is technically illegal under the law. And the Canadian law actually referred to biblical sexuality as a myth in the text of the law. But and there's lots of nations that have passed a conversion therapy ban, but Canada was only one of 3 nations to pass it unanimously. And that means that not a single MP voted against it. Jeez. And that's just one, because it gets even worse than that, because 2 days after the legislation was introduced, the Conservative Party requested a rare bypass to any formal debate. So you had no scrutinizing of the text. You had no suggestion of amendments being made. In fact, Canada was the only nation on the planet to pass a conversion therapy ban without a formal debate, without even looking at and examining whether or not this is a risk to religious freedom. And a lot of religious leaders across the globe have referred to it as a Trojan horse against targeting religious liberty, because it literally criminalizes the teaching of biblical sexuality. There was a man in Malta who was the only person ever to be charged under these bans, and he was charged because he went on a radio program and shared his testimony of how he came to Christ and left the homosexual lifestyle. That is why he was in a court battle for so many years that followed. And so these bans really do have a great impact on religious freedom, but Canada didn't dare to question it. And in the UK, on the other hand, the UK, they had a lot of debate about it, and the religious liberty and the risk that was posed to religious liberty meant that they couldn't impose a federal ban. They just couldn't go through with it when it would be so targeting of freedoms. And that's just one thing that's in Canada. And that was, again, the Conservative Party that asked for that bypass to happen so there would be no formal debate. So that really tells you a lot about the radicalism specifically of Canada. And the next thing that I would like to bring up with...
Can you hold it just a second there? Don't you have to put conservatives in air quotes when...
Well, they're called the Progressive Conservative Party, actually.
Okay.
So that already tells you what you need to know about that.
Yeah, so let me ask you this real quick before we move on to the next one, Breanna. What in the headline, with no opposition? So I know there are Christians in Canada. There are some good churches there. I may be a minority, but America is not too far behind. But what do you mean with no opposition? What would that look like to have opposition? You mean Christian voices speaking up on this?
Well, specifically in this article, I'm talking about there's no major political party that takes a stance against these things. But across the board, really, that's something that's witnessed in Canada, I think, way more than in the United States, where you have a kind of apathy within the society as to standing up for morality and freedom. And you ask the average Canadian about, what they think about America and what they think about politics, and a lot of times I've had a lot of conversations with Canadians where they'll say, well, I'm so glad that I'm not American because their politics is crazy. And I don't understand that mindset, because the reason why American politics is so crazy is because you have opposition there. You have people who are willing to stand up and fight for the freedoms that they have and want to keep, and the morality that they hold to. So that's the reason why you see all of that. But in Canada, there's really no opposition in that at all.
All right, so go ahead. Let's talk about euthanasia and abortion, because we've talked about the MAID, medical assistance in dying. And there are a lot of states in America that have similar, it's not called that, but it's basically the same kind of legislation, which is tragic. Go ahead, Breanna.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the abortion topic really illustrates my point when it comes to the lack of opposition, specifically as it relates to morality-related issues. But with abortion in Canada, there is no gestational limit on abortion. There is no requirement of parental consent or the consent of the father. It is bragged about by the Canadian government as one of the, most common medical procedures in the country, and the Conservative Party of Canada, the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada, they look at these things and they consider abortion to be a settled issue. They put out a declaration in 2023 that said that basically said, if we're going to be elected, then we are not going to impose any kind of restrictions on abortion. And already abortion is, a free-for-all. There's no limit. It's abortion up till birth. So, and tax funded, by the way. So, and then you move on to the topic of euthanasia. And euthanasia is, it's startling what's happened in Canada. It's become a horror story for the rest of the world, where you have, since its legalization in 2016, over 100,000 people have been euthanized in Canada. And the yearly total in Canada is more than all other nations combined. And it's one of the leading causes of death. That is startling, and it should be startling. And in 2016, it passed to the just for the terminally ill. In 2021, it passed to the non-terminally ill, and now they're just looking at expanding it further, despite the fact that you have all these other nations that they have people that are trying to pass these laws legalizing euthanasia, but they haven't been able to do it because there's this, case study of Canada that says this is where our country is going to go if we allow such things. Why would you want to be like them? And, because the horror stories coming out of Canada are just, I mean, it's insanity where you have people who are not adequately giving consent, people that, gave their consent and then withdrew that consent and they were euthanized anyway, people who it was their family members who gave the green light, people who said that they felt very pressured to do this, that the people that were talking to them made them feel like a burden on their family and society. No matter what they try to say, that's not compassion. There's no way to wheel and deal that until it, resembles compassion. And it's really, all of these things are just an example as to why, Canada has gone so much further along this track than a lot of people realize, and a lot of, Americans realize. It's there's such a close proximity to one another that it's almost, you think, like with, progressive ideology, surely it's one of those European countries that's, the farthest down this track. It's crazy to think that that's Canada.
Breanna, we were going to try to cover 3 topics today. I don't think we're going to do that because I'm kind of led to stay here just for another few minutes. Talk about the Online News Act, and then the fact that that this is amazing that Canada has arrested pastors and has frozen bank accounts of dissenting voices and suppressed press freedom. Talk to us a little bit about that, and then we'll move on.
Well, when it comes to the media in Canada, we have within the United States and Canada, there's a very different dynamic when it comes to social media and the access to news that you have. Like in the United States, there is we have access to all of this foreign press. In Canada now, under these laws that were put together, which placed pressure on Meta, it caused it so that there was a complete blackout of any foreign news organizations being shown to Canadians through Meta platforms. And what that does is that isolates the population and controls how much news they get, unless they go and they seek it out themselves. But within Canada already, there is such a suppression of conservative news groups, genuinely conservative news groups, I should add. And so, but when you can't even access these foreign news sources, I mean, what does that sound like? You had that within many communist regimes where, all of a sudden you were only getting the news that was controlled and put out by you. And the major news organizations in Canada are, they're government funded in that as well. So really you have one thing that you're being told and they want you to basically stick with that. And since most people are getting their news from social media, unfortunately, I think that has a big impact on Canadians. And
Okay.
And when it came to arresting pastors, and I mean, that was Alberta. That was a province that's considered to be, the most conservative, the most American-like, and they were the ones that, began the process of arresting pastors and the European Union. There was members of the European Union that looked at Justin Trudeau after he had made all of those arrests from the Freedom Convoy and froze bank accounts and all those things. And they stood up in Parliament and they said, we don't even want you here because you are, you're running basically a dictatorship before everyone's eyes. And we want to show that it's unacceptable.
It's really frightening. It's not maybe surprising if we have understanding of the Bible, spiritual warfare, good being called evil, evil being called good, end times, and understanding of the end times in 2 Timothy 3 and onward. But let's move on, Breanna. We have to talk about J.D. Vance because I think people are hearing mixed messages depending on who he's talking to. And I would love to talk a little bit about your article, A Winning Political Strategy, where J.D. Vance opts to appease dangerous anti-Israel conspiracies. Some of us are really Vance supporters and we want him maybe to run for president next, but What's going on here? Just hit us with some of the bullet points here that you're concerned about.
Well, within the United States, there's this, growing anti-Israel sentiment. It's already taken over completely the Democrat Party, but it's also seen rising, especially among the younger generations when it comes to the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm.
And J.D. Vance, unfortunately, has very heavily played into this. And, he's refused to distance himself from Tucker Carlson. And he's even in his interview with Joe Rogan, for example, he started pushing some of these conspiracies against Israel himself, saying, Israel has led information campaigns within, the United States to manipulate public opinion. And also when Joe Rogan started talking about the Epstein files connected to Israel and, blackmail, all these things, J.D. Vance didn't say one word in defense of Israel. In fact, he used the whole thing basically as an opportunity to blame Israel for his failed, memorandum of understanding with Iran, which of course failed because Iran is Iran. They're the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism. So, but the real problem when it comes to J.D. Vance is that it seems like he believes this is a winning political strategy. And if that actually becomes a winning political strategy in the United States, then that will absolutely change the nation, because we know that nations are judged based off of their treatment in Israel. We find that in Joel 3 and Genesis 12:3 as well. Where, God loves Israel and the Jewish people, and he calls all the nations of the world to be a blessing to them. And when you have an administration that is leaning, politically, because they think that that's what the American public wants, is basically anti-Semitic policies, then you have a really big problem in the United States.
Yes. So what do you think about advisors to President Trump and advisors to J.D. Vance? Are they on the same page in your estimation, Vance and Trump, or are they trying to play both sides? What do you see from your research?
Well, yeah. So I published an article as well about Michelle Bachmann and advice that she would like to give to the president. And basically, yeah, what that was talking about is she said, you need to take the handcuffs off of Israel. You need to make sure that Israel has a free hand to be able to defend itself as it sees fit. And there's really been a back and forth with Trump when it comes to the nation of Israel. He's done better than any other president before him in the stances that he has taken in favor of Israel. Mm-hmm. But there seems to have been a certain amount of frustration during this Iran war, and specifically as he's trying to do these negotiations, where he is, almost expected that Israel is just going to absorb attacks that they receive from Hamas and Hezbollah and these, any other terrorist that wants to attack them, because, it disrupts the area while he's doing negotiations. But obviously Israel can't be asked not to defend themselves in any capacity, because as Michelle Bachmann, she noted, if Israel puts down their guns, they die. If the terrorists put down their guns, there's peace. Yes. So we need to have more people that are properly explaining to Trump the need biblically to defend the nation of Israel and why it matters for even the blessing of the United States, because God said, I will bless those that bless you, Israel, and I will curse those who curse you.
Back to advisors in this article that you're mentioning about what Michelle Bachmann said, it's another concern. She said he needs to pay attention to who he's listening to. Some of the voices surrounding the president have Michelle Bachmann very, very concerned. And she says, what's Israel supposed to do? And this is in your article. It's even written in the charter of Hamas, quote, our goal is we kill every Jew. These are terrorists that are acting on their belief. So it is astounding to me, Breanna, that people can still be in favor of Hamas or be against Israel? What would we do? Would we say the same thing about America if someone was attacking America from all sides? Wouldn't we expect our government and our Air Force and Army, Marines, to defend the country? So we can't have that double standard. One more quote, and I'll let you finish up. We've got 3 minutes left. You say, well, many politicians and analysts provide advice to the president on foreign affairs. Bachman's words are built on biblical conviction, and this is important, and an understanding that America's treatment of Israel holds great weight in deciding its future. End quote. You're right on. Please elaborate a little bit more, and we'll wrap up, Breanna.
Well, one of the reasons why America has been so blessed as a nation is because of our support for Israel, that we were the first country to say, when Israel declared its independence, U.S. President Harry Truman, 11 minutes later, went and recognized that Israeli sovereignty and defied his cabinet in doing so. And you have seen lots of examples of the United States and this incredible ally and partnership with Israel. And as I said, with Trump, he has certainly done that in a way that no other president has done before. He moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. He was willing to take action against a nuclear Iran. And but yeah, he needs to be careful who he's taking advice from, because you can't play both sides of this issue. Because if you answer, Genesis 12:3 wrong, where, are you going to bless or curse Israel? Then you're in fact putting yourself in the crosshairs of God, the God of Israel, and you're cursing your own nation. And that's what all nations are going to be judged based off of that standard, just like all individuals as well are going to be judged based off of that standard. How did you treat Israel? How did you treat the Jewish people? Did you have the love for them that God called you to? And this is also important for, obviously, the church to understand, because we can't allow anti-Semitism within the church and replacement theology that distorts God's plan and love for them. We need to understand our Bible correctly and divide it properly also.
Friends, thank you, Breanna. Friends, pray for the president and vice president. Pray for wisdom for America's leaders, that we don't go down the wrong path. I understand, I don't say it's right, Breanna, but I understand politically they're trying to maybe play both sides, maybe to keep supporters, but you've got God's side. Abraham Lincoln has a quote. I'm not even going to try to paraphrase it, but we got to be on God's side, not worry about politics and pleasing man. This went by way too fast. We've got to have you on again sooner. And we just thank you for all the work you do, friends. Go check out harbingersdaily.com. Breanna Clausen, God bless you and protect you, give you favor, and enlarge your territory. We'll talk to you soon, hopefully.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're most welcome. Friends, support them. We appreciate your prayers and support here as well at worldviewmatters.tv. God bless you, and as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter. We'll see you next time.